I'm about to say I'm not going to type today. There it is. All right. Episode 3, or Trace for our Spanish audience.
Are we going to number these episodes?
I started with episode 1, so I don't know. Maybe
we
I'll
always start with episode 1. My question was, are we going to number them? We don't need to.
Well, I mean, maybe for organization I will. I don't think I should do numbers and then letters and then code and then candle scents.
But I mean, you don't have to tell them which episode.
No, I don't have to.
You don't have to label it as episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could just do it, and then whatever order. Because people tune in and let's say they see episode 12, 1. They're like, oh, there's 12 episodes. I can't watch this because there's
That's
12.
not true. We know where to start then. We'll binge watch anything.
There, see? Mom said it's okay. I got permission.
Okay.
How about I put a disclaimer? You can watch these in any order, but this is episode 3.
There you go.
Go back to typing. Last time we talked a little bit about the comedy process, and it was kind of vague. It was hard to nail down. So I asked you a question about how do you know how your jokes work? How do you know about gauging the audience? And so we wanted to talk about that a little better, how to record yourself and evaluate yourself.
You have to record yourself. And one of the things that is the hardest to do is to listen to tapes of yourself speaking and performing. And you have to do it. You have to force yourself to listen to it and to watch it if it's a video. And then you have to be honest. And this is the hardest part, is giving honest evaluations, because your tendency is going to be to do two things. You're going to either reject everything as a dismal failure, or you're going to elevate everything as a raging success, and neither of those two things are actually the truth. So what you need to do is become a passive observer of your own material. And with comedy, if you're doing stand-up, it's relatively easy to just take a tape recorder up on stage. That's what I did. I took a tape recorder literally on stage with me, put it on the stool. And the advantage to doing that is you actually will get the audience noise into the microphone on your recorder. Some people would put it in the back of the room so they could hear themselves, but it's hard to gauge what the audience is doing from the back of the room. So if you take it up on the stage with you, then it's close to hearing what it was like to actually be on stage. It gives you a little better indicator. Sometimes the back of the room, the audience is disengaged, and even if they're not engaged, it's harder to hear from the back of the room. And so your tendency, if you put your recorder in the back of the room, then you're going to record a set that's going to sound like you didn't do as well as you did. So for your own sake and for your own sanity, take the recorder up on stage with you, and then record all of your shows, and then listen to them when it's done. And don't just listen to the shows where you did well. You have to also listen to the shows where you did not do well, and then ask yourself why. That's the shows that you didn't do well are actually more important than the shows you did do well. It's more important to have recordings of yourself bombing than it is to have recordings of yourself killing and wiping out the room, because those you can't learn much from that other than, yeah, what I did worked. And while it makes you feel good and there's value, you have to do that every once in a while. Once in a while you have to have a killer show, or else you'll be sad. But if you only listen to recordings when you're doing well, then you don't ever work on what's weak. And I know a lot of comics that make this mistake, where they exclusively focus on everything that's working well. They only think about the stuff that's working well. and basically live in that zone where they're patting themselves on their back and they're telling themselves, man, I'm a really good comic. Yeah, you've got 3 jokes that are killer, but then you've got the rest of your set where it's crickets. And you have got to be able to evaluate that honestly. And that's, if I had any skill that I brought into this naturally, it was that. It was the ability to honestly evaluate what I had produced and determine whether or not it was any good. And the stuff that doesn't work, the stuff that didn't work, when I was recording it, I would gauge how the audience was reacting. And by their level of laughter, I could say, okay, that joke is not there yet. It's not working, but I still think it has potential. I think that my instincts are telling me that this is still funny. The fact that they're not laughing means that something is not correct yet. I don't have the right words. I'm going too fast. There's something is out of whack, because this should be getting laughs. And you can't do that while you're on stage. The only way that you can gauge that stuff is when you're not performing. And so you make a recording, you can listen to the recording, and you can hear how the audience reacts, because what you tend to do is you focus on either the highs or the lows when you're on stage. So if you're on stage and you tell a joke that is just dreadful, it just maybe gets boos, maybe they throw beer bottles at you, that's what you're going to remember about the entire rest of the set. So everything else that happens on stage that night, you're going to forget it, because you're just going to remember being pelted with beer bottles. And the same thing is true if you get a standing ovation. If you tell a joke that brings the house down and everybody's on their feet and they're throwing money and roses at you, that's all you're going to remember about that set. So you have to record everything, and that way you'll have a record of what actually happened all the way through.
I feel like that's some pretty good advice for not just comics, but really any performance. I've known people who give speeches who that could be applied to, or actresses and actors that can be applied to them as well.
This is why comedy makes your whole life better, because it's the principles and the rules of comedy they're not just for stand-up comics. They're not just for comedians. And that's one of the things that I have encountered for years, is people going, well, I don't want to be a comedian, so I don't need to know this, or I don't need to know that. But the fact is that comedy is about communication, and it's about truth, and it's about communicating truth. And it is an effective way to communicate truth, because when you're funny, people listen to you, people pay attention, people remember you. And so anybody who has the desire to have people remember what you say, to have people remember what you're doing, you benefit from learning how to be funny. And one of the crucial aspects is being able to look at what you're producing, whether you're writing it, whether you're saying it, whether it's a script, whether it's a drawing, a cartoon, whatever it is. You've got to be able to look at it and honestly evaluate, is this communicating what I want to communicate? Is this funny? And if you have this warped idea that either everything that I produce is terrible and it's no good and I'm ashamed of myself for having produced it, or if you think everything that I produce is a work of art that everybody in the world should appreciate, both of those things are not true. Either of those extremes are not true. You want to be able to evaluate properly what you're producing, and that is something that should be for anybody, not just comedians.
So they have the recording, or if they're actresses, they have video of themselves or whatever. So they have that stuff. Is there merit in being by yourself trying to evaluate? Should they bring in a trusted person to help them watch, or maybe a coach or a teacher? to help them evaluate? Because I know that you keep saying it's a talent that you kind of had naturally. But if they're more like, I don't know, me, and maybe they can't gauge that very well, what should they do? Are there tips to try to evaluate it more honestly, or is there a way to practice what they think isn't working besides just getting up on stage and doing it performance-wise? Because I know that some people might want to practice it before they're just constantly booed.
The benefit, you should have somebody in your life who will give you honest feedback. Somebody who will tell you straight up what the truth is. And that's an invaluable resource when you're developing. Comedians will go to an open mic, and then they have other comics that will sit around and they will help them evaluate what they were doing. They will make suggestions and they will punch up jokes and so on. But if you are an actor, you are a speech giver, you're an author, you're a painter, it is good to have somebody in your life who you can trust to tell you, what they think. Now,
We're almost done.
sorry. Now, when somebody is telling you what they think, at the same time, you still have to have the ability to discern whether or not you're going to accept what they tell you. Just because somebody is being honest doesn't necessarily mean that they're right, but it's good to have somebody who's a sounding board, who will tell you, yeah, thumbs up or thumbs down on what you're producing, because that gives you another opinion other than your own.
So, if people would like for you to be that person, are you available to be that mentor, that coach?
You can go to johnbrandon.com or you can go to school.johnbrandon.com, and there's a course online where I personally give you all of my wealth and of wisdom for developing as a funny person. And I don't do a whole lot of one-on-one mentoring with people. I have a group of people who, we interact and talk back and forth with each other. But yeah, go to the website and you can get in touch with me and reach out, and I will answer questions as long as you don't become a nuisance.
And do you have any other tools for somebody who, say, isn't a comic? Do you have something else for somebody who is
I
just
have
a
a book.
performer?
I have a book. The title of the book is Life is Hardy Har Hard. It's available on Amazon, and it will help anybody who has a crummy life to have a better life.
Wow, that is a big guarantee.
That's what it does. That's why I wrote it.
Wow, all right. I think that's everything. Oh, there it is. Does that make sense?
I'm sure we're going to cut that out.
Now we are.
The